Hello, brothers. My name is Jim Clarke. I made my rites of passage at Ghost Ranch in 1995. It's been my privilege to serve aluminum as a wisdom elder and weaver for many years. I come to you as a brother, hopefully as a wounded healer. I come to share the fruits of my many years of professional work and personal reflection and struggle to become whole like many of you. What I'd like to share with you are the fruits of these years of work, study, reflection, prayer for my own healing and the healing of many other men. So I entitled this workshop as a masculine way of healing. These are individual ways that can help bring healing into your life. They are more than just techniques. They are ways of becoming human. So the first one I would like to recommend is one that I've done a lot of research on, and that is the use of rituals and ceremonies in your life. Rituals and ceremonies have been around in the lives of human beings for over 70,000 years. These are ways of being able to recreate a new reality. As Mircea Eliade, very famous anthropology, pointed out, that when you choose to do a ritual well, you are creating a new cosmos for yourself and for your community. As Father Richard Rohr has often said that if you do not work to transform your pain, if you do not go forward in the work of healing, you will transmit it on to others. Not just your own family and loved ones, but also to your communities and the way that you live your life. So to create a ritual very simply involves choosing a symbol, a key symbol that tries to hold the pain, the struggle, the wherewithal of where you're at that particular moment in time, and represents for you what you'd like to let go of in order to move forward. And then what do you need to say? What words could accompany this symbol? It also helps to be able to give this an awful lot of preparation, to work with your dreams, your imagination, discussions with friends and family, to be able to get out what it is inside of you and to be able to imbue that symbol with a deeper sense of meaning. Finally, it also helps to be able to engage what we call the shadow side, or the dark or repressed parts of your being that for whatever reason do not want to accept this new part of you, this new movement within you into a new life. This whole process is meant to be witnessed by some type of community, where the community is one person, the community of animals, the community of nature, the community of the cosmos. A ceremony is something different. A ceremony offers comfort to you as you make transitions in your life. Rituals are primarily used in times when you're stuck, or when you're trying to make it a point of moving from here to there. So ceremonies honor beginnings and endings, where rituals are about transformation. Ceremonies give you comfort. So this is why the ancient peoples used both in tandem. And so to be a man of ritual and ceremony is to be a mature man, to know and to recognize that throughout life, which is an adventure, there'll be many, many opportunities for you to be able to move forward, honoring these symbolic ways of expressing yourself. So keep in mind that your soul, your interior life, does not know the difference between ritual and reality. That's how powerful it is. To commit yourself to regularly making rituals and ceremonies is a simple but profound way of honoring the sacredness of your soul, your psyche, your interior life. A second way is a word that you have heard from the scriptures, the Christian scriptures, and it's a part of most world religions, and that is the regular practice of forgiveness. Don't let that word put you off. The regular practice of forgiveness very simply means the regular practice of letting go of your attachment to the past. Letting go or releasing yourself so that you can live in the present moment, whether that moment is joyful or painful. To forgive is a sign of a mature man. It's a sign of a man who's operating from his king archetype, that he sees the bigger picture and realizes it doesn't help him and it doesn't help others for him to remain stuck in the past. Because this is where the Creator lives, in the present, not in the past or in the future. Forgiveness also involves some steps or processes. First step is to acknowledge your hurt. As men, we often say, that wasn't that big a deal, or that didn't hurt. But to honestly admit, what that guy said, or when I felt ignored, or I didn't get the promotion, to admit that hurt, that stung. If not, it slips into your unconscious and it stays there, like a rejected part of your own personhood. When you're ready for step 2, you can say, I'm tired of hurting. I'm ready to move on. The second step is where most believers struggle the most, because this is the step where you honestly acknowledge your desire to get back. So it's a stage of struggling with your resentment, your bitterness, your contempt, your desire for revenge, all of it. And that's why it feels so dark and ugly, and we don't want to deal with it because we don't want to look at that side of us. So this is why a lot of us project all of this into movies or characters in novels or into living, breathing human beings that we want to demonize. This step usually is the longest. This is the step that often calls for a deep prayer, a deep self-awareness, and or the use of ritual. Certainly a lot of prayer. When you're finally through this valley of darkness, you'll find yourself saying, I'm tired of carrying this burden. I'm ready to move forward. The third step is simply this: choosing to forgive, choosing to let it go, putting that in words, and then asking the Creator to bless your enemy, to bless the person who's upset you or hurt you, or the organization that someone or other has shamed you or rejected you. That's a tough one. You'll know you truly have done your work when you find yourself praying something like this: O God of many names, I choose to forgive Mike for what he did to me. And I ask that you bless him in his life, his relationships, his career. Help him to truly come to know the depth of your love for him. Amen. If you feel a deep sense of peace, a sense of reverent letting go, you've done your work. If you try to make a deal with God in this prayer, back to step 2. Step 4 is optional. And I say that because you can't force it. Step 4 is reconciliation. That's the choice to meet with this person one-on-one and to finish talking it through. The reason it's optional is, 1, you can't force it. 2, you let go of it and give it to God. If you want me to follow through on this in reconciliation, you're going to have to present the circumstance. I'm not going to go looking for it. Then you just sit back. So the way that God would operate, very simply, is the guy shows up at your work, or you get a text or an email from him within a few days after you've had this powerful prayer. That's when you know God's gently but clearly saying, yes, I want the two of you to talk. The next one, very simply, is to honor both sides of the brain. And this is the expression, the healthy expression of your pain through the arts. Could be in the form of art, music, dance, song. These are traditional ways of putting into an artistic expression what you're feeling. Sometimes just using particular colors is enough to release the anger or frustration, the deep sadness or grief. Sometimes it's a matter of going back and forth. Dr. Angelise speaks about her research cross-culturally amongst the First Nation peoples. She either interviewed personally or via a different type of online communication many shamans and medicine men and women to ask them some simple questions. In your tribe, in your community, when a member of your tribe is struggling with disorientation, depression, a sense of separation from the true self, what do you do? And she was amazed to discover that cross-culturally, they all gave about the same answer. They would ask 4 questions. When did you stop singing? When did you stop dancing? When did you stop becoming enchanted with stories, especially the story of your own life? And finally, when did you stop becoming uncomfortable with silence? I don't know about you, but I was stunned in a realization when I heard those questions. Because often those are the first things to go, the very things that draw us together to other human beings. Because pain tends to isolate us and to pull us back from community and relationship. There's a feeling of distrust and not wanting to put ourselves out there. But these four aspects, once again, open us up to the healing presence of getting it out, whatever needs to be released into the cosmos. Another very traditional cross-cultural way of experiencing the healing of the Creator is to be immersed in nature. Often, when we're feeling depressed, sad, dealing with grief, or yes, even anger or hurt, going into nature can be so healing because we walk and walk and walk until we see a scene, or a tree, or an animal, or a bush, or some dead part of nature, and we realize, oh my gosh, that's how I feel. And there's such a resonance and a connection, you don't need to say anything. It's like just holding a vigil with your interior life through the symbolic expression of nature. Many years ago, when I was going through the beginning steps of and stages of midlife, I made a vision quest. When I was out in my sacred circle, it rained for 36 hours straight. I was soaked to the bone. I had to empty my boots of water 4 different times. As I sat there cursing my luck and wondering, what the hell am I supposed to do here? I remember asking God, yeah, I spent a lot of money to be here. I've given you all this time to pay attention to what you have to say, and there's no birds, not even insects to visit me, to be one of your sacred messengers. What are you trying to say to me? And this very gentle but still voice said to me, just look. I've been looking at the same scenery for over 36 hours. Just look. And then I saw it. What I refused to see. The beauty of the forest was definitely there. Nothing had changed, but my perception had changed. What I could not see is that behind all the beautiful greenery of trees and bushes and plants was all the dead trees, all the dead bushes, the dead leaves that created the opportunity for new life. Again, the voice continued, look closer. And I looked all the way up into my own sacred circle. And finally the voice said one more time, look where you're standing. And as I looked down, I was dumbfounded because right across my sacred circle that I've been sitting in, standing in, kneeling in for many, many hours was obviously where 2 fallen trees had just slowly died and given their life and their remains to Holy Mother Earth. And in its place of these dead trees were these tiny, tiny, little, small green plants with a single small white flower. I had completely missed it. I was so blind to how the Creator was speaking to me. I didn't want to accept that midlife meant I had to die to my previous life in order to be present in the middle of my life. It changed my perspective. It changed my life. It not only gave me meaning and focus for the next stage of my life, it also reminded me of the great gift that you cannot have one without the other. Death and life are 2 sides of the same coin that we call reality. Another aspect that can be very healing, and is very much a part of Illumin, is centering or meditating or contemplating, all within the general parameter of being present to the one, whether it's the one breath, the one word, the one image, the one moment of silence. But just to observe your mind wandering or your feelings fluttering around and not holding on to anything, rather just letting it be. Just letting it be, not fighting it. And as you begin to practice this, hopefully, ideally, about 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening, you'll find that your brain slowly becomes wired, rewired in a brand new way. You also begin to find that you bring this practice in the way that you deal with your life. Rather than having to constantly react to life, you let it be. You slowly learn, don't take things personally. It is what it is. You slowly begin to realize you don't need to make assumptions. It is what it is. Another practice that I have found extremely helpful is what we'd call Embody Therapy. In this general category, it's how you relate to your own incarnational nature, your own body, your temple. We are neither to worship the temple nor to be treated like a slave. So that wonderful in-betweenness is where we stand as men of faith, as men who recognize we are inspirited, ensouled. So here are some aspects of embodied therapy that you can apply in your life. One is just to notice your breathing. Just to notice your breathing. Are you taking full advantage of the gift of your lungs? Breathing in deeply and holding the breath and letting it go. I find this especially helpful to me when I'm feeling a bit anxious or a bit nervous or fearful. Say, Jim, just remember to breathe. It sounds so basic, but take a deep breath, hold it, then let it go. It's a natural, calming way that can really help ground our bodies. Another way to care for our bodies is to very simply practice massage therapy. Massage therapy, massaging your hands or your feet or your temples. You may find a work called Capacitar to be most helpful for you. Just go online, you can Google it. Capacitar is a Spanish word that means empowerment. C-A-P-A-C-I-T-A-R. And there you have several different embodied ways of expressing the interior angst, struggle, the yearning for consolation or comfort. Another way is to make use of sound and music. Both can be very healing in the way that they're used, but they can also be destructive if they're not used properly. They are meant not to help us escape from life, but rather to help us grow deeper in life. You might also find the regular practice of Tai Chi or yoga to be helpful, where these are ancient forms that we can use today through our own lens of faith in the form of expressing in gratitude for our bodies. And with a slow movement and stretching, begin to recognize not only our limitations, but the wonderful ways that we can access the rest of our nature through our bodies. Another tool that's been used for centuries is a tool of what we call dream work. It's not just analyzing dreams, it's becoming aware of our dreams. And you become the best interpreter, and to be honest with you, the worst interpreter, because the dreams tell us or give us information that we don't have consciously. So the dream will never waste its time in giving you the same things you already know consciously. Every night we dream about 3 or 4 times. Now, whether we remember them or not, that's another matter. But these dreams help us to process what one author called the day residue. Dreams can also prepare us for the future. Dreams allow us to bring resolution to unresolved conflicts. Dreams can also help you when you feel stuck. I know for myself, as both a speaker and writer, when I am stuck for an idea, I always ask God, would you please speak to me through my dreams? And even the times I can't remember the dreams when I wake up in the morning, it's amazing. I know exactly what I want to say and how to say it. Because your interior life, your soul, is your ally in your journey, the adventure of becoming fully who you are. This authentic work is such that in the dreams, there are no moralities. Rather, the dream is just presenting to you other options of how you can live out your life. So think of it this way. Dreams are learning a different language. The language is symbolic. Language is symbolic. I'd recommend that perhaps you go online to a podcast or two or get a good book about dream interpretation and begin to work with them. Active imagination is seen as an ally to dream work. Active imagination, as its name implies, is about actively engaging images from your dreams and bringing them into your conscious life and letting them play out. This way you're allowing your ego and your shadow world to interact. It brings out a quicker, clearer, and deeper form of transformation. C.G. Jung said that when he discovered active imagination near the end of his life, he had wished that it would have been given to him much earlier. It would have saved him an awful lot of needless pain and suffering. And so it is, these two work together, again, from the interior of a man's life to help him to move forward. The next technique or tool is challenging. And I say that to you honestly, brothers, but it's worth the effort, is what we call shadow work. These are the parts of you that you, for whatever reason, cannot or will not accept about you. And so to work with your shadow means a great opportunity to enter with a humble heart and to deal with the ashes of your life. How does the shadow reveal itself in your life? Often it's through the people or situations that really tick you off. This is why we can tend to demonize our enemies, reject them, and want to say they're the most evil of people. The people that we have the hardest time with normally are projections of our own interior shadow. But here's the beautiful thing. And those people we idealize, the ones we look up to as heroes, these are the very people who hold for us our golden shadow, the parts of us that we cannot or do not want to accept. Let me give you two quick stories from my own life. I remember when I was taking art classes many years ago as a young person, my aunt was admiring my artwork and telling me how good she thought it was and what a great artist I was. And she went on and on and kept saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. But I said, I bet you could draw as good as me and perhaps even better. She said, oh no, I could never do that. Well, just a few years later, she started taking art classes, and sure enough, she was much better than I was. We tend to project onto another that which we're not ready, just ready to receive yet, whether it's of the dark or the light. Again, many years ago, I decided I wanted to make a public vow of non-violence. And so I asked my father, who was a World War II vet, to be my witness. And he very graciously agreed. And I thought, rather righteously, wow, okay, I've made a big step. 3 days later, I was driving to go and visit my brother, and I saw a side of me I had never experienced before. And that was, I was stopped at a red light. In front of me were two 20-something young men in a beat-up old Ford pickup truck. The light turned green, and all the traffic behind me began to move around, but the old truck in front of me didn't move very much at all. In fact, it moved very slowly. And the two young men were laughing and pointing backwards. The way I interpreted it was, they were trying to get my goat, and boy, did they get it. Now, I stupidly gave them the old Italian flip-off. Well, they did not take kindly to that. The passenger got out and kicked my door in. Thankfully, I didn't look at him, didn't say anything. I moved to the next lane, and I drove down my brother's street, and I burst into tears. I was ashamed of myself. I was angry. I was deeply grieved, and I was profoundly confused. What in the world went wrong? This is not the Jim Clarke I know. And for 3 days, I was blocked by this feeling of deep grief and shame. And I kept asking the same question over and over. What's this mean? And then very clearly and simply, I sensed God say to me, you prayed to be a man of peace, did you not? Yes, Lord, I did. I'm showing you how much work you have to do. Just because we do something consciously doesn't mean it's done. Often it's the cleanup work is where we get things honestly done. That's what I learned from that experience. That's the way shadow presents itself. Usually it's by coincidences, it's by opposites, it's by personalities that tick us off, it's by things that don't go our way. Rather than running from them or cursing them, see it as a mirror, an invitation to do your shadow work, to sit with it and very simply say, what's the meaning of this? What are you trying to say to me? Letting reality become your friend and not your enemy. Another way that can be very helpful is to create a journal. I personally use my journal for times when I'm angry, just to be able to get the anger out in a written form. Sometimes it's about writing letters to people who have offended me or upset me. Other times writing a letter to God, but just to get it out. It's a place where I also put down my dreams so I can come back to them. These are tried and true methods that work. Here's another technique that you could also use in your journal, is what we call sentence completions. I'm angry that, I'm sad that, I'm hurt that, I hate that, and just let your words flow. Perhaps you may find it easier by doing it on your computer, but whatever works to you. Just allow the emotion to flow. And please, for your sake, don't share your journal with anyone else. That's between you and the Creator. Otherwise, you're going to constantly be editing it as well. What if somebody finds it? Let it be your own sacred place to go, to be able to let go, to dump off this negative energy. Another way that can really help you, and that's necessary for all us men, is to honestly do your grief work. Grief work is the work of men. In most of our cultures, we men are taught that sadness, grief is not manly. And so we reject anything that anyway smells like grief and sadness. We pretend we're not sad. We even wear dark glasses at funerals, so just in case we happen to tear up, nobody will be able to see it. The reason grief work is our necessary work is because it's the part of our life that needs to just be to let go through the body. Tears are when the soul sees the truth of life and just lets it go. Laughter is when the soul sees the absurdity of life. It's another way of letting go of the way things we think should be, letting go of our need to control. And that's why we avoid grief at all costs, because we want to be in control of our emotions. But grief and laughter teaches us, no, we're not in control. Reality is as reality is. So it's a regular practice letting go, whatever that means. Sometimes I find it helpful just to grab a symbol, to walk with it for a while. When I'm ready to let out a shout and just to throw it. To throw it in the ocean, to throw it in the desert, to throw it at the top of a mountain. Whatever way that helps me to honor the deep feeling of what I need to let go of. Another tool is just the painful work of recovering your own inner child. This is what we call in men's work, facing your father wound or your mother wound. This is difficult stuff, brothers. At the core of the wound with the father is the feeling that he and you are not enough. That he did not live up to your expectation what a father should be, could be, ought to be. And the wound work involves accepting him as another human being. To tell it to you as straight as I can, the gift of your father is that he gave you physical, biological life. That's his gift. As Dr. James Hillman is famous for saying, after that, everything else is gravy. So yes, it is a tough life. And our Father's only one man. It's the community of men that helps us to wake up, to be initiated into the bigger picture called manhood. So to forgive our fathers, to see them for individuals that they are, is a big step forward. What are the lessons that you've learned about being a man or about not being a man? The lessons you learned from your father and your mother. What type of man are you today because of your father? Can you yourself decide to be different because of your father's modeling? The mother wound is a bit different. The mother wound typically is about dealing with this sense of clinging on, the one who is different, feeling controlled by mother, okay? I grew up in a very codependent relationship with my mother, and for me, this was the greater work. With my father, it was addressing my fear of him because he was a rageaholic, and so I grew up being deathly afraid of my own anger. But my moments of breakthrough were when I could finally, literally, look myself in the eye when I was angry and realize my anger was different. My anger was strong and powerful, focused and directed. My father's anger was not. It was all over the place. It was then I could honor my interior feeling world. The beginning of my own healing process with my mother wound is when I could finally name what it was in my block with my mother. And that was that I felt totally connected to her. I didn't feel like my own person. In fact, she was the one who named me. It wasn't my father, it was my mother. And this feeling of clinging on to me became so strong that I became codependent through much of my adult life. The breakthrough came when I could just grieve and grieve and grieve. I wept from the depths of my bowels, realizing how much I'd lost because I clung on too tightly to mother. So brothers, not easy, tough, painful, but necessary work. C.G. Jung said, because we're not willing to face legitimate suffering of our life, we fill our lives with needless neurotic suffering. Suffering that repeats itself over and over again. Pain is the event or the circumstance. Suffering is a reaction to it. We can suffer a whole life long needlessly, rather than facing the core issue of our pain and transforming it by the necessary grieving and suffering. And so I invite you to do that work that you might become whole and complete. Another area that can deeply help you, and all of us men, is to be a part of a men's group. I don't mean the type of men's group that you go out for drinking and celebrating and telling jokes and all that type of stuff and discussing sports and weather and politics. No. There's a place for that. These are called acquaintances. I'm talking deep male bonding in a support group. A group where you talk about the real issues in your soul. Issues of meaning and purpose and direction. Self-doubt. Questions about God. Your own purpose. Your own self-esteem. Feelings of loneliness. Choosing questions that really elicit the deeper meaning of what does it mean to be alive? Why were you created? What are you going to do with the rest of your life? I belong to a men's group. We've been meeting for close to 40 years now. And I'm delighted to say I'm standing here before you because of them, brothers. You don't see them, but I'm standing with them because they have been honest enough with me to push deeper, to ask the important questions that perhaps even I was afraid to ask. Forcing me, inviting me, encouraging me to go deeper and to ask those questions. These brothers have helped to save my life in more than one way. And so, another area that I alluded to earlier is just silence. But silence in a broader sense. We live in a very noisy world. But just to create moments, pockets of silence can be very helpful, where you can process, reflect, observe, call it whatever you want, what's going on around you and within you. But when you're distracted by the noise of music as you're driving home from work, the noise of the news, or conversations that go on without much depth to them. And so what happens is this becomes like fast food for the soul. It does not nourish us. And no wonder we feel so deeply lonely. What nourishes us is that which comes from within the soul, deep within us. That gift is given as we truly listen through the gift of silence. One last technique is an area that I'm very fond of, I've done a lot of study with. And this is the area of storytelling. How do you tell the story of your life? It can either liberate you, it can imprison you, it can bring you healing, or it can deepen your pain and suffering. So the ancient peoples practiced what we call myth making. They would tell the story from a larger perspective, so it involved the whole tribe. They recognized that every person's story is a part of the larger story, the cosmic story. And so the early tribes would gather together in the morning. They would share the stories of their dreams, or the stories that came to them in their moments of imaginal wanderings. Gradually, these stories began to coalesce around central themes, these creation stories, goal stories, pattern stories. Some of them found their way into the sacred scriptures. Others began to be seen as cultural myths. But poetry and myth-making were ways of honoring what we call the sacred language of the soul. So what does it mean to make a myth out of your life. The word myth does not mean false or untrue. Rather, the ancient meaning of myth is the big story. That if you're telling a part of your life story, you're telling it in such a way that it's not so much concerned with the literal facts as what we'd call the symbolic meaning of what's going on or what happened. Telling it so that others are engaged in the story and perhaps even share in the way the story is unfolded and told for future generations. So a couple years ago at our Oracle leadership gathering, we decided to invite some of the men to do this. And Saturday night, there were about 10 men who were invited. Please share a portion or your story, whatever way you like, and you have 5 minutes to tell it. And of course, we were all excited to wait and see what happens. And these men had been prompted how to do this. And so one by one, they got up. And it was something sacred to behold. There were times that I had goosebumps as these men courageously, humbly, vulnerably told their stories, but not the way you'd expect. One man danced out his story. Another man told his story in complete silence. He mimed it. Another man told his story in such a way he used symbols all the way through. In between the telling of the stories, one of our key musicians would pause to give emphasis to what the story had just told us. And then he'd pick up one of the musical instruments and begin to either sing or create such a rhythm that we would join in. And then when we concluded with this musical interlude, we all shouted out, and that's not the end of the story. Brothers, it's not the end of the story of your life. You still have been given time to be able to tell your story in such a way as liberating, healing, opens you up, opens all of us up to the greater glory of the Creator and to a life that's not only worth living, but worth dying for. So that the legacy you leave is a man who's whole and complete, who's not afraid of his tears or his laughter, who celebrates not only his successes, but also his failures, his wounds, because now his wounds become sacred for others to behold. And that because of his courage of going deep within himself, he has learned that robust vulnerability is truly a gift, a virtue of manhood, to be shared with all of God's people. Thank you, brothers.